The latest statistics have revealed the sad reality that much more still needs to be done in the fight against crime. In Gauteng, murder and other serious crimes increased drastically in the first quarter of this year. Do these persistently growing numbers reflect the dire state of our policing system? And it's not just the public that's lost faith in the police. A survey revealed that there is strong mistrust among officers themselves, with about half of police officers saying they believe their colleagues are dishonest. So how do we use this data to help improve policing? To speak on this, I'm joined by Faull, Dr. Faull, a senior researcher at the Institute for Security Studies. Welcome, Dr. Faull. Thanks so much for your time this evening. So the crime stats are bleak, but unfortunately, South Africans have almost become inured to crime. It makes news headlines for about a week after the release of the quarterly stats, and then we carry on with our lives. But hopefully behind the scenes, a lot is being done to try and reduce crime. I want to tell us a little bit more about evidence-based policing, what that is and how it's different from our current system.
Sure, thanks very much for having me. And apologies for the darkness. I'm suffering a power loss. But yeah, the latest crime statistics are not very positive. We've seen a surge in murder, 22% increase in murder. And as we all know, murder is the most reliable indicator of overall violence because it is the most likely statistic to be detected by police. And evidence-based policing isn't a model of policing that we want to see the South African Police Service embracing. Rather, it's a mindset. In the same way that we've used evidence to respond to the coronavirus pandemic, in the same way that we use evidence to predict and respond to climate change, the world of policing is increasingly looking to science and research evidence to ask questions about what really works in policing. So we know that we spend 100 billion rand on policing each year. We spend roughly 365 million person hours working police work. We arrest over 1 million people for serious crimes, but very little is known about what all of this money and time and activity produces in terms of public safety. And that's what evidence-based policing is. It's about saying, how do we know that what we're doing is achieving the outcome that we expect? And quite positively, there is quite a lot of growth in the country, both within the South African Police Service and the research community, to embrace these questions and the methods needed to answer them.
In a lot of situations, we see communities very hesitant to cooperate with police in terms of providing information both about their communities, about the criminals who operate there, because there's a general mistrust and a lack of faith in the police. So how much of that data is absolutely essential to trying to fix the major problems with our policing system?
Good question. I mean, community trust in police is the bedrock of a functional police organization in a democracy. If people don't trust and perceive police as legitimate, they're not going to cooperate with them. They're not going to report to them. That's why I say murder is our most reliable indicator, because we know that almost 50% of assaults, for example, aren't reported to police. And if police don't know what's happening, they aren't able to respond to it. So that's where both police data and data from other institutions, including civil society and other government departments, is crucial to understanding where and when and why harm is concentrated in particular places. So, for example, in the Western Cape, the health department has introduced a very important violence monitoring mechanism based on hospital intake data. So whenever somebody presents to a trauma facility with violence-related injuries, the healthcare practitioners capture the types of injuries, the kinds of weapons used to cause them, the relationship between perpetrator and victim, the location, and all of that combined with police data empowers everybody to better respond to the causes of harm. And if we add to that community information, we add to that all manner of other data, we are better empowered to respond. And it's not just the data that's important. Just because one person says something is true, it doesn't mean it is true. So what we need to do is take all of these different data sources, overlay them with each other, consider them together, and try to puzzle out the truth amongst the spider web of data. But simply using reported crime to police isn't going to take us very far. We need to think more creatively, think more critically, and then use that thinking and those questions to better steer our police practices.
Are we collecting enough data? You've just used an example about hospitals in the Western Cape, which sounds incredibly efficient. Is that kind of methodology being applied across the country? So are we gathering enough data to tell us what we're doing wrong and what we need to fix it? And more importantly, are we reacting to the data in the right way to make sure that it's effective in adjusting?
Yeah, I don't think we are where we want to be, but the fact that these things are happening is positive. So you mentioned in your opening statement that the SAPS recently presented the results of the climate survey, which it had conducted amongst its own members, and it presented those findings in Parliament. The findings were bleak. It shows there's a lot of low morale, there's mistrust amongst police officials. But it's really important that we are asking those questions, that the SAPS is asking those questions of itself. In the same way, it's really important that some health care facilities are capturing violence-related injury data at intake. So it's not happening everywhere. All data systems need to be improved, much better surveys, more partnerships need to be entered into. But the fact that we are starting to move in the right direction, I think, is something to be celebrated. We can't get anywhere if we don't start. And the fact that people are starting to ask questions, collect the data, and partner across government departments, partner with civil society, partner with researchers and academics. This is what's needed to take us forward. We can't do this by operating in silos. We need to come together, share data, ask questions, generate data, and then use that to steer our activities, and then most importantly, evaluate our activities to see whether they are achieving what we think they're achieving. And when they aren't, we learn lessons, adapt, and proceed. So, yeah, we need to move away from simply looking at reported crime to something far more holistic.
A lot of what we know is wrong with our policing system is happening internally. So we know, as you've said there's very low morale. There's a lot of distrust amongst police members for their own colleagues. There are also very bleak attitudes about career prospects within the police force. People feel that they're not being promoted according to merit. There are very low promotion prospects. Police are hugely under-resourced, not trained adequately. There aren't enough police officers. I could go on and on for another half an hour. All of this information is in the public domain. We've been speaking about it for years now, but it doesn't seem that we are addressing any of those problems, even when we look at an evidence-based policing methodology or state of mind. So one has to ask the question, do we have adequate, good leadership within the SAPS to try and fix those problems?
You raise good points. I think everything needs to start with leadership. We've just had a new national commissioner appointed. I think we should give him some time to settle in. But I think everybody is looking to him to steer things in a new, more positive direction. I must, however, in the context of a discussion of evidence-based policing, also push back a little bit against the statements you've just made, because an evidence-based approach to policing asks exactly that we do the opposite of what you have suggested. So there are common tropes. There aren't enough police. Everybody's got low morale. They aren't trained enough. But what evidence do we have to support this? For example, in South Africa, we very regularly hear people talk about the United Nations recommended civilian to police ratio. This doesn't exist, however. It isn't something which we need to be striving for. Rather, we need to be looking at where and when and how violence clusters in climate space. And we need to target our resources and our activities to those particular places, those individuals, and those times. That's what the evidence suggests. The same goes to training. How do we know people are poorly trained? I think almost anybody who's engaged police and sought service will have had at least one bad experience. Many of us will have had good experiences. But that doesn't necessarily mean the training is bad. The training could be decent, but if the organizational culture and the management culture is bad, then whatever you're trained in can be diluted and dissolved and made null and void as soon as you return to your station. So this is what an evidence-based approach to policing and anything in life really is. It's about saying, these are the common stories we have in our heads. How can we ask questions and set up projects and experiments to test them to see whether they are in fact true? If we double the number of police in a particular area, is that going to lead to a 50% reduction in crime? We can hypothesize and test that. There have been lots of really rigorous, interesting experiments conducted in other areas, including places quite similar to South Africa, Brazil, Colombia, with similar levels of violence. And often our intuitions about policing don't hold up when we subject them to rigorous experimentation and evaluation. And I think that's what we need more of in South Africa.
Incredibly positive that that is happening, that there are people in South Africa with the knowledge, researchers, scientists who are willing to take part and put this new way of thinking to the test and in motion to improve our policing system. Thank you so much for speaking to us. That was Dr. Andrew Faull from the Institute of Security Studies.